On the morning of November 5, 1973, I was taken to the War Academy for the third time, coming from Lebu. So, there we go again asking questions, but this time a bit messy. It seemed to me that I was not like a real interrogation. They went from one topic to another, always kicking and hitting with the backs of their guns. At one point, I remember because it was almost funny. There was someone who came into the cabin and said, "Who is he?" The other responds, "No, go away." And he says, "Shut the door." He said, "It does not close." The cabin was small. Then there is one that says, "He's under my responsibility." No, he's under my responsibility. The other raises the voice and says, "He's under my responsibility." We are in the Navy, so we count the number of bars in the sleeve, and whoever has the most bar is the one who is right. The environment changed radically. It did not last long, and they take me in a jeep, being the single prisoner, with a sailor on each side, and the officer in front, next to the driver. I was still blindfolded. We did not follow the path back to the Lebu. Then I said to me, "This smell burnt. Valparaiso, there are hills, a lot of hills. If you are attentive, you recognize the roads." They take me back to the Intendancy. We arrive there, and the jeep pulls up behind a big black limousine with the French flag. I thought, this sounds good. I was getting nervous because the officer was one of my students. He asked me to have my hood removed, and he said, "How are you, Mr. Laborde?" I didn't know what to say to him. I didn't know if it was good for me or if it was to eliminate me. When I saw the limo, I thought, this is good. There was Mr. André Leroy, first Secretary of French Embassy and also Consul of France, flanked by two giants. They were the consul's bodyguards. They worked on some papers, no question for me. It was like a wedding. They tell me, "We expel you from Chile. We expel you for treason to the motherland." All in silence. By the way, there was an English Anglican priest who handed me a sandwich. It was the welcome. I weighed 85 kilograms before entering the Lebu, left it with 47. This in a very short time, from September to November. This is how I got out of the Lebu. So the consul was concerned because he had a safe way document to return to the embassy in Santiago, 150 kilometers to do. Are we going to arrive before 7 in the afternoon? That was his first concern. There was the French bodyguard who had been in Algeria and in Vietnam. There he was telling and satisfying André Leroy's curiosity about how torture was carried out in Algeria, how was the torture in Vietnam. Here he was getting first-hand accounts. Despite that, the trip was pleasant. I was heading towards liberation. Meanwhile, in Lebu, the torture continued. We got to the embassy, which was really full. Everyone slept everywhere. The embassy was under siege by the military. No one could enter or leave, in principle. Everyone was talking about the different methods of getting in for shelter. I was able to pass because they expelled me, but the Chileans who wanted to go to France to go into exile, it was not easy for them. 4 days after entering the embassy, my wife took refuge. We had organized, with the help of the ambassador, an entire operation for her to enter the embassy with the 2 children. We spent a few days in the embassy with the help of the ambassador named de Menton, Pierre and Catherine, his wife. They were wonderful. And there, a few days later, we left. They took us a bus from the embassy to the airport. It was planned that we will leave with a group of Brazilian refugees. There were only Brazilian refugees in that group. They were former Brazilian refugees in Chile. We were supposed to live on an Air France plane. And at that last minute, they announced a stopover in Rio. We had to go through Brazil. Then there was a general revolt among the Brazilians. No, we are not going to leave the Chilean hell to enter the Brazilian hell. It is not possible. And we left Santiago for Brazil, only 4 people. Me, my wife, and the 2 children. In Rio de Janeiro, the plane fully filled up with a bunch of passengers bound for Orly. We arrived to Orly, of course, but with a huge delay. Nobody expected us. The solidarity organizations were no longer waiting for us since they had announced cancelled flight. The 4 of us were forgotten. By chance, we met a Peruvian exiled in Paris who was trying to find out what had happened to the Brazilians. He took us to his house and we told him our story. The Peruvians put us in contact with French solidarity organizations and a new life began. I want to explain you about the ad hoc commissions, Valech Commissions, and Rating Commission. What was it about? By the way, there had been a fierce dictatorship from 73 to 1990. 17 years. And those years of dictatorship were followed by 60 years of almost dictatorship. Pinochet was not dead. Was in command of the army, but in this new democracy, nothing was done against his opinion. On the other hand, during the new democracy with President Lagos associated, it was like an enlarged popular unity. The popular unity plus the Christian democracy who had voted for him to exit from the dictatorship. They wanted that there should be compensation, since they rejected all this torture and all this death for nothing. There had to be state compensations for the victims. On the one hand, the military did not want to talk about this, but on the other hand, the deputies wanted to vote on a law because they wanted to create compensation. They found the solution of the ad hoc commissions. What great hypocrisy! To determine who had been killed by the dictatorship or if the person had been died for sickness. This was the Rating Commission, named after the lawyer who chaired it and who fought hard for human rights. And there were the Valech Commission, named after the Catholic Bishop of Santiago, who presided over it. It decided who had been tortured and who had not. A lot of investigations have been done, and sometimes investigations with members of the armed force. Some officers self-authorized confidences. That one has been under torture. That one did not. This is how the Valech Commission worked. In 2004 and 2005, there are people who presented themselves to these commissions, but not all. There were many who were afraid. If I show up and the situation turns around again, so this is dangerous. So we don't know how many were tortured. Officially, there was something like 38 applicants who came forward and were considered ratified. Then people complained because they had not had enough time to introduce themselves. There was another complementary list, with 2,000 new ones recognized by law to have compensation for having been extorted for nothing. A compensation of 250 per month for life. But in all this, there were no former political prisoners living abroad. And so, years later, in 2006 and 2007, they reopened this commission for those who lived abroad. But it was difficult. You had to prove that you had been tortured. Where? How? And by whom? But there was tortured as blindfolded, without having contact with people in Chile, given that I was in France. It was not easy. At that time, there were already 38,000 who appeared in this first list, and those who had been tortured. I chose to ask my adoptive brother, Werner, since in the meantime he had been recognized as being tortured in Lebu, and this in Valech's first list. I should try to ask him to prepare a document affirming that we were together in the Lebu. This is not easy to do from here, from France. I remember that I had been following in Chilean newspapers every day. And in the reader mail of a newspaper, there was someone who had written anonymously, but signed El Gringo Werner. I said to myself, he's alive. A few weeks later, I see another article saying Gringo Werner de Quilpué. I said to myself, first, he's alive, and second, he is in Quilpué. I started here from Saint-Dizier to phone every day all the municipalities of Quilpué and its surroundings. They sent me for a walk. Then I called all the restaurants in Quilpué, most of which also sent me away. One day, I will never forget it, the El Fogón Latino restaurant told me, wait, maybe. Call me tonight. That's why I got back touch with my brother Werner. This period during which I was very desperate wanting to make contact really affected me.